What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the second mixtape by Travis Scott. Basically, this mixtape is called Days Before Rodeo, and it came out in the summer of 2014. Now, the thing about it was after the success of Al Faro, Travis Scott had done a pretty good time with that particular mixtape. That's a pretty stellar one. I reviewed that back in June. I recommend checking out the review and the mixtape as far as that kind of goes if you haven't seen about it. But the thing about that particular project, Alfaro, was it was kind of one of the ones that helped spearhead like the 2010s trap movement. Like Travis Scott had been working on it since like late 2012, somewhere around that time. But 2010s trap really started to manifest mid 2011, 2012, late 2012, that type of stuff. But it really kind of took forefront around mid 2013 as that started to become more of like the central sound. That was definitely one that I noticed that really helped kind of put together like the skeleton and the foundation of like some 2010s trap music. But fast forward to a year later, and this album doesn't quite have the same like degree of like the elemental trap that I noticed. Like Al Faro really felt like something that continued to be in trap music even in like 2018 and 2020 and 2022 and further and that type of stuff. But this one kind of has like a lot more just kind of addled kind of atmosphere about it, where I would definitely say, and by addled I mean drug emphasis as far as that kind of goes, just more kind of in the emphasis of just kind of like the sort of stuff that Future and Juice World were kind of more on. This really makes it a pretty supreme feeling. It's definitely one that I would recommend for having some good recreational kind of time. So it's definitely one I would recommend for having some recreational times. The thing about it is the trap beats on here are a lot more skeletal, and I noticed like certain ones on here like Don't Play is a particular different vibe. That one feels more like early 2010s kind of rap music, but there's songs on here like Mamacita and a couple other ones that kind of have like more like Sloppy Toppy and Mamacita, some of those type of songs that kind of have like a more skeletal kind of 2010s trap with all the shape shifting that trap music was kind of doing around that time. So it's just interesting that these were kind of like early versions of songs that were hit trap songs in like the mid 2010s, like Bad and Bougie and Slippery by Migos and some of those type ones, and like the songs that Future would do off of Dirty Sprite 2 and the What a Time to Be Alive project, and just some of that type stuff as far as that kind of went. So Travis Scott was kind of elemental. I feel like probably Al Faro is probably the more revolutionary project, but this is not to be toyed with. I definitely feel like this is definitely one that has pretty good execution. I actually would say I like Days Before Rodeo better than Al Faro. Even though that one was more revolutionary, I feel like this one just has a stronger execution, more hit songs on here, has 12 songs and such, but a lot of them are pretty stellar as far as that kind of goes. And I just would have to say that even if Al Faro was more revolutionary, I feel like this one probably would have to be superior just in the context of how it pulled it off and just all the differential kind of vibes that it did. Because I think, despite the fact that this is kind of a sketchy kind of project, and by sketchy I mean it's just kind of just things on the easel, that type of stuff, as far as trying out some new things and just kind of the sound of just it being shape shifting and trying to have like that particular soundscape as far as that kind of went. Where last time it was just strictly just like vanilla trap and just kind of more straightforward city tunes, as far as that kind of went. I feel like this one in particular just has a lot more kind of augmented kind of sounds as far as trying out some new landscape kind of things. It's just more versatile and more varietized, and it does pull off. There is trap on here, but it's just kind of in a lot more, not quite as many looming kind of car numbers and that type of stuff as far as like bops to step out and look flashy and flex and that type of stuff. It just kind of has differential vibes that we'll get to. That's kind of the concept about it. Still pretty touted project. I like the concept that Travis Scott did not make every single project similar. It's not like there's a problem with making projects similar. Days Before Rodeo is kind of a sound that was a breath of fresh air and helped expand upon the sound of Al Faro and just kind of make like an evolution upon it without losing like its finesse about it as far as that kind of went. So I look after it. There were a couple of singles on here, and one of which is probably one of the best songs on this album. I would have to say this is Don't Play, and it has the 1975, who I've never heard of, and then Big Sean on there. So this has got a real kind of glaring Don't Play is kind of a glaring blue blood bop. I would say it's an easy ominous club hit, and it's loud and stretching. This is definitely one that just looms and has like such an emphatic kind of feel about it. Just really excellent kind of mixtape hit. It's surprising that this is on a mixtape because this is such a stellar song, especially in terms of the haunting production, just the way that kind of went. It's just so emphasized and just emphatic. I definitely like the theme and the way that this song kind of carries itself. This great hook on here, great vocals, just kind of, I mean, this one doesn't feel like as much a trap. Like I was saying before, this kind of feels like early 2010s rap music, just a little bit, just kind of, I mean, it has like some of that sprawling kind of auto-tune type vocals as far as that goes, but this one just kind of feels more like standard rap. as opposed to like the sprawling kind of trap that would be on this project. So I look after Big Sean does pretty well on here. He's a pretty good lyricist with this song. And I don't know who the 1975 is, but I think they might have helped out with the hook and stuff. It's just the overall snare one. I would download this mixtape just for this song. This is one that I've had. Don't Play is one that I've had on my MP3 player for quite some time. I definitely messed with this song. It's definitely one of the best songs on this project, but that's not, it's not to say that there's not other gems on here. But the second single is Mamacita, and this has Rich Homie Quan and Young Thug on there. So this is kind of an early bird 2010s trap evening clapper. I would say it's a minor club hit, but it definitely gives me more vibes of like a dusky outdoor jam. This one just kind of has like a Western kind of John Wayne type feel about it, just really kind of cowboy like almost. It's kind of more like classic rodeo type feel. I mean, I guess with this album being called Rodeo, it makes sense that there would be songs like that. So you look at that concept, it's just kind of, I feel like this one took me a little bit to get used to. Like I've had this song on my MP3 player for quite some time, and I've tried listening to it, but I just couldn't get around to it as much. But I'm glad to finally mess with it now, just to kind of be able to say that it is a pretty stellar kind of nightclub song. It's a minor club hit. I feel like this is more of like a backyard kind of smoke session, powwow type outdoor festival type party, more so than like a club hit. Although it can kind of be in like a minor sense. It's kind of more outdoorsy, I would say, but it is a good one. So and this one's kind of more. This is like what I was saying with the skeletal kind of 2010s trap being shape shifted and that sort of sound. Where this one's not quite as looming and quite as vehicle prone, and this one's not quite as looming and vehicle prone and speed down the streets as much. But this one's just kind of one for like nightclubs as far as that would go, with just the way that trap would be continuing to be expanded upon, 2014, 2015 and such. This is just kind of one that was kind of a trailblazer. So I look after it like to look after this project. There's 12 songs on here, and out of those 12, I recommend 8.5. So we'll go ahead and recommend those 8.5 songs so you know. So they would be Don't Play, Mamacita, Drugs You Should Try It, Zombies, Basement Freestyle, Back, Skyfall, Sloppy Toppy, and the almost song is Backyard. So talk about Backyard real quick. Backyard is kind of some decent outdoor fare, I would say. It's got kind of a snazzy beat with like a jivey tempo, but the beat is not monopolizing. This is just kind of one where just like an easy kind of groove, evening picnics in the backyard. This is definitely more of like an evening bop, just kind of being out in your backyard with like a couple beers, something like that. Decent smoke session, just kind of like a mid kind of mini shindig kind of vibe about it. It's kind of mini thrills, not quite a sheer highlighted just craze as far as that kind of goes. There's definitely a better cookout and craze kind of backyard outings as far as that kind of goes. It's just kind of like a mid tempo one. It's an interesting one, but the reason why it's an almost song is just because the beat is not quite as sheerly monopolized. It's just kind of a decent little bubbler, I would say. Nice little beer swilling kind of one for like a minor sense, football season, that type of stuff. I just kind of look after it, just being able to say that it's not overly dominant, but it's an almost song. I do recommend it enough to be able to say. But so some of the songs I recommend on here, like Zombies is a really highlighted one. This one I definitely recommend is Zombies. This is a dazzling electro hit, and it's got like a jovial night fair energy, and I would say it has a stellar beat and hook. This is definitely one that's probably one of the more thrilling ones on here. Definitely some nightclub kind of energy and this overall dazzle, I would say. This is not really as much of a trap one. This is kind of more electro sounding, but it's kind of another stellar beat on here, just like Don't Play. Those are Zombies and Don't Play are two of the flashiest beats on here, I would say, in terms of like their snazziness and just overall catchiness. That's a nice one. Basement Freestyle is kind of like a solid pull up and flex song. This is definitely one that kind of was reminiscent of Al Faro, just with some of those standard vanilla trap type songs, just for cruising around and pulling up type music, just vehicle prone type music with a good system and car visuals and that type of stuff. I would say it's a good flex song for a mixtape, I would definitely say, and it's just got some litty gleaming kind of vibes. I mean, I like the concept of this being a freestyle, but I almost would have wanted for it to have a more interesting song topic title as far as that kind of went. But it is a pretty nice one as far as that kind of goes. It's an easy kind of flashy one just to kind of have for vehicle prone type stuff. There's not as many vehicle prone type songs on this particular album. This is a nice one. Another one that's pretty similar to Basement Freestyle that does kind of have some of that glitzy flash and trap music tone is Back, the bonus track. Back, the bonus track, is a pretty catchy song. This is some eerie skeletal trap beat feels. I would say it's newish, but it's also sketchy in terms of what it was doing with trap music, and the murkiness is pretty catchy. This is just kind of a haunting beat and a haunting type song. I definitely feel like definitely was expanding upon the trap sound. This is kind of one that's an expansion of the stuff off of Al Farrow. This is kind of some vehicle music like basement freestyle, but it's just kind of one that's kind of more almost like this feels more substantive and more kind of fleshed out compared to the stuff on Al Farrow's. Just kind of the establishment and the evolution of what was kind of going on around that time. So I definitely appreciate the highlight of just getting that one. Definitely is a pretty good one for just like standard trap music. It's just kind of another vanilla trap beat, but it is more established. I feel like this one just has a little bit more skin to its bone compared to some of the ones that were kind of on like Al Farrow and just around in 2014 and stuff. So this is kind of a good one. But Drugs You Should Try It's a pretty nice one. This is actually kind of like a druggy, groggy blear of a song, and it has day after hours feel about it, just day after hours malaise. I feel like Drugs You Should Try is just like a typical kind of drug addled wailing of a song, just moans and groans of like some drug addledness, and it's definitely a good variation of that. It's the sort of stuff that Juice World kind of does and Future kind of does, those typecats that have those kind of bemoanings as far as that kind of goes. It's not to say when I say bemoaning, I'm not complaining about it, saying, oh, this sucks, and this kind of sound and this sort of soundscape that folks like Juice World and some of them kind of did sucks. Because I appreciate it. I do like some of these. These are just kind of malaise kind of tunes for just like makeshift. This is probably a pretty good makeshift song. I would say this is definitely day after hours. I mean, even though it sounds like a pretty malaise kind of song in terms of like the emphasis being like, just hungover, just being kind of hungover and whatever's on the song, I just look after it being able to say this just kind of a decent makeshift kind of bop for just that standard evening haze, just that concept of like sunsets, orange skies, 6, 7 p.m. type stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just a nice one. Another one that's pretty similar to Drugs You Should Try It is Skyfall. This has Young Thug on here, so Young Thug makes 2 appearances on here. This is a dreary, kind of drugged out malaise, I would feel like. It's got some snazzy glitz, and it's an easy, lazy club highlight. So this one's a little bit more club oriented, not quite as makeshift malaised about it, but Skyfall feels a little bit more recreational in terms of stepping out for the night. I mean, this is definitely one where you're still pretty malaised and just high as hell, that type of stuff as far as being out and about. But this one's not so much just like in terms of just like the malaise of after hours work and just like makeshift kind of feels. This one's kind of more recreational, just kind of really in a slump type feels as far as being out and about and having a good time in the evening and night fair as far as that kind of goes. So it's a good one. And then Sloppy Toppies is another one that kind of has some skeletal feels of just like early 2010s or mid 2010s trap music. This is one that feels like this is kind of a mellow dazed. This is kind of a mellow dazed club gem. It sounds like mixtape Migos, and it just feels like an early version of Bad and Bougie. This one just kind of has like a kind of, yeah, Sloppy Toppy has like a bunch of emphasis about it. It feels like a variation of like Migos' Slippery and Bad and Bougie and stuff that they would do years later with Culture, but then it also kind of has like some mixtape Migos type feels. Then it also has like the looming kind of Travis Scott type feels of songs like off of Al Farrow and songs like Don't Play and some of those type ones. Just kind of the kind of auto-tune vocals that kind of go along with it. This is another one that sounds just like ripped out of 2017 or something like that. This one is kind of skeletal, but it has the execution pretty, like it's getting the emphasis better down as far as like the concept that was going to happen across the rest of the decade as far as just kind of being a more revolutionary kind of sound. So it's definitely one where they were throwing darts at the dartboard and getting closer to hitting the bullseye. It's not to say this isn't a good song, because it is. It did hit pretty well on the bullseye, but it's just kind of the concept of this is just early stages of mapping that out as far as that kind of went. But I like the concept. Just, yeah, I feel like the concept of watching trap music kind of blow up as it's been on like an 8, 9, 10, 11 year run as far as like the stretch of what it's done and like its dominance is pretty interesting. But just the kind of early bird kind of stages of just like getting it mapped out and kind of like shipped as far as that kind of went is just interesting. Kind of has just good concepts. Some of these are really kind of good. They're skeletal compared to the stuff that Travis Scott would do on like Astro World and Rodeo and some of those type ones later. I'm curious. I am going to have to mess with Rodeo and see what that's like in terms of album fares to get towards some of that. But definitely this sort of concept is just brimming with like stuff that's just kind of shape shifting sounds that would go on to really cause a lot of damage. So he was definitely a front runner of like this particular sound that was going along with it. But talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here. Talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here. Like Days Before Rodeo, the prayer was just, I didn't really appreciate that beat that much. And it's kind of the same thing with Quintana Part 2. Even though that had T.I. on there, I felt like that was just kind of a clumsy execution of one. I was expecting maybe something with just a more kind of pristine kind of amount as far as trap music kind of went, but it just didn't quite cover that ground as far as I would wanted. And the prayer was just kind of one that just didn't have like a compelling enough production. That one was just kind of, and the prayer was just a production that just didn't quite have the compellingness to really keep me on the edge of my seat. And then I felt like the only other song I didn't really appreciate that much on here was just Gray, and that one was just kind of like a more homely kind of bound one that just didn't quite full blown like the execution, how that one kind of turned out. That one was just kind of an oddball of one that just didn't seem that compelling as far as it kind of went. But yeah, so me liking basically 8.5 out of 12 songs on here, almost 9. I would have said that that's pretty close to getting a 10, but because it's a mixtape and it's free and there's 9, damn near 9 songs, 3/4 of this project that are kind of kick-ass songs and worth downloading as far as that kind of goes, I would definitely say that 8.5 out of 12. I'm going to give this mixtape like a 9 out of 10. It's definitely better, in my opinion, than Al Farrow, despite the fact that that one was more revolutionary and had more vanilla trap for vehicles and just nightclub music as far as sprawling and some of that type of stuff that was kind of going along. But this one just has better stuff. It just has better execution, better styles. The skeletal stuff that they pulled off is just, even though it feels very stark and minimalist compared to later 2010s trap, I still feel like it had the execution of being able to do it and just kind of having some good Johnson jives where it just kind of was trying new things, but they worked. And I definitely feel like highlights with some great beats on here, like Mamacita, Don't Play, and Zombies are some excellent ones. There's some Car Flash with Basement Freestyle and Back. There's just some overall good ones, like, Backyard is a decent bubbler just for a mini kind of mid-tempo backyard kind of jive, and Sloppy Toppy's like an early version of Bad and Bougie. So there is some good stuff on here, plus some Drogado ones. So in terms of the social score, I'll give the social score a 10 just because I like all the emphasis of this. Is definitely pretty nice outing music. I would definitely say it's free on top of that, so I do recommend the concept of fucking with this project and seeing what it's about. It's another revolutionary one. Even though I feel like I've said, I feel like Al Farrow is more revolutionary. This is actually pretty revolutionary within itself, just because it's kind of like, the 2.0 of what was going on with this. It's kind of like the shot in the arm, or if one shot in the arm's not enough, you need a second shot in the arm to kind of get bolstered for seeing what Travis Scott's about. This is definitely a good example to be able to do that. So it's just kind of like the re-up with Travis Scott, just proving that it wasn't a fluke at the time and that he really was going to revolutionize some sounds and kind of help set forth, trap music and things like that, and just have some good time. So it works for that. But in terms of the future, like Travis Scott dropped Utopia back in July, so that's some stuff that's kind of gone on with that. I am going to eventually review Rodeo and things like that. But this is pretty good here. This is definitely quality on here. I'm glad that I decided to finally listen to this after having it on my MP3 player for all these several years and such. So that's definitely pretty good here.